So if someone called you a status seeker, I want you to tell me whether you would feel complimented or insulted. Okay, just show of hands. Someone would say, I feel complimented. Insulted? All right. It's not a very positive term, but what I want to talk about today and convince you of is that one, you already are a status seeker. Two, it's actually a really good thing. And three, if you could become an even better one, it would have a tremendous benefit for your life and for your career. So let me talk about what I mean by that. The definition of status, or a definition of status, if you look in the dictionary, is the one that psychologists like myself will use. And that is that status is the extent to which one is highly respected and admired by other people. So it is a judgment in other people's minds of how much they respect and value us. And this notion of status is one of a very few, what we call fundamental human motives that psychologists will study. So for something to be fundamental to our human condition, a couple of things have to be true. First, it has to be linked to our long-term life satisfaction, health, and well-being. And status is all of these things. We see from lots of studies that when people feel highly respected and valued, their life outcomes improve. Not only do they subjectively feel more satisfied in life, but their physical health improves, their mental health improves. And when people feel like they're not respected in the relationships that matter, all of those variables suffer. So life expectancy, reproductive success, mental health, all of these things. So I always say that physically and psychologically, lacking respect in relationships is just as damaging as living a life without friends. That's one thing. The second thing we see for it to be fundamental is that we have to put forth effort to try to achieve it. And we see lots of evidence like this, that people are very vigilant about figuring out how much status they have, and they'll put a lot of effort toward trying to get more of it, and even more importantly, to trying to make sure they don't lose any. So people are very vigilant. I am a mom of 3 kids. If anyone has, as a parent, or they ever grew up with a sibling, and you try to serve your kids something like cake, they will look and figure out, is my sibling's cake 1 millimeter bigger than my cake, right? And if so, you're going to hear about it. And you think it's sibling rivalry, but it's actually more fundamental. People are paying attention to what rewards am I getting, how much am I valued and respected. It's a symbol of status. If you've ever been in an office where people had to shift offices or move space and vie for space, people will take out tape measures and be like, this office is 3 inches bigger than that office. So these types of signals, people are very vigilant to monitoring their status in an environment, and they'll go to efforts to make sure they get more. So lots of studies, when we give people a choice between doing things that are going to get them more respect from other people or doing things that will benefit them in other ways, like increasing their success or their performance, people will choose to allocate their scarce effort to doing things that are going to get them the respect. So this is something that is also consistent with it being a fundamental need. And then the final thing is that we see it across cultures. That is not something that's limited to people in one organization, age group, country, any of that. If we look across all types of demographics all the way around the world, we see evidence that people care about status. So when I say we already are status seekers, this is fundamental to what it means to live a good life, and we pay attention to status. Everyone does, and that is a good thing. Now, as fundamental as it is, what has always been fascinating to me is how little we talk about it, especially in comparison to status's much more popular cousin, which is power. Everyone talks about power. Power is defined as controlling resources that people value. So money is a resource. If at work you control a budget, or you can hire and fire people, or give people a good performance review or a bad one, anything that other people want can be a source of power. I have my 3 kids. My oldest one is a teenager who drives. If I'm holding the car keys in my hand, that's a valued resource. It becomes a source of power. So power is also fundamental to living a good life. It's something all people seek. It is a good thing. And it has a lot of similarities with status, except for the fact that we talk about power a lot more than we talk about status. So you're staring at HBR and TED. The reason they're up there is as part of my work when I was writing about status, I looked at how much do we see topics that are essentially power and status appear in 2 of the most prominent sources of information that people often go to online when they're trying to learn or read about something. And power dwarfs status. It's at least least 2 to 1, and sometimes depending on the particular format, it's like 7 to 1. So we spend a lot more time in our shared narrative talking about power than status. I wrote a book. It's called Likeable Badass. The subtitle of the book is How Women Get the Success They Deserve. It is a book about status. Status is not a gendered concept. I just chose to write that book for an audience that I care about. But when I first wrote the book, it was always going to be titled Likeable Badass. But the subtitle was actually the topic of a tremendous amount of negotiation. The original subtitle that I wanted to use was Likeable Badass, How Women Win the Status Game. And I was really proud of myself because I thought that was a really good subtitle. My editor rejected it in about half a second. She said, nope, Likeable Badass Days, that's not good. I said, why? I think that's a good title. She said, nope. She said, it's a bad way to sell books. You cannot put words on covers of books that people do not understand. Okay, it's a marketing no-no. So I trusted her judgment. I said, fine, we'll find something else. We eventually did. It's great. But I thought it was really interesting as a psychologist that here was this topic that is so fundamental to us, so many people, including myself, research and study, and yet the word is so foreign that we can't even put it on a cover of a book because no one would know what it was. So one of the things I want to do today is shine a spotlight on this concept of status and talk about how we actually influence ours in ways that are really authentic, really fun, and really consistent with who we want to be. So to talk about why it's important, I want to talk about one of my favorite studies. It's a study of a 9-person work group, and they measured power and status in this group. The group, just as these little stick figures depict, had 6 men in it and 3 women. And members of the group had equal power in that they made their decisions by voting, and everybody's vote counted equally. So in that sense, everybody had equal control over the decisions that the group would make. But they noticed that not everybody in the group had equal status. What they found was that the 3 women in the group were disproportionately likely to be interrupted. And an interruption is a mark of status. Who gets to have the floor, who gets to finish their idea, and who's cut off. It's a subtle but very important way that we show who we respect and who we don't. So it's probably not surprising that you might find women were cut off more than men despite speaking as much. What might be surprising to you is the specific work group in question. And when I say the details again, you'll shout it out. People will know what it is. It is a 9-person group. It had 6 men and 3 women. They make their decisions by voting. It is the Supreme Court, okay, at this point in time, okay? So this is the study where they found Justices Ginsburg, Kagan, Sotomayor are all interrupted much more than male justices by everyone, by the other justices, by lawyers appearing before the court. Now, from that study, right, we can see a couple of things that talk about how important status is, all right? And this is why becoming a status seeker, becoming somebody who is conscious of the respect of our audience and takes authentic steps to influence it can be such a beneficial thing. So 3 reasons. All right, first, status is the basis of influence. We all want to be influential somewhere, sometime, at home, at work, with people. But if you're sitting across the table from somebody and in the back of your mind you're thinking, I do not respect this person, is there any chance that you're going to be influenced by them? No. And neither will people when it comes to you. So if we don't have respect of our audience, we have set ourselves up to fail at being influential. So status is a huge source of influence. Status is also a huge source of power. I always say resources, they follow respect. Meaning when you get to be in charge and control stuff, it's normally because someone has voluntarily allowed it to be so, right? My son is probably not going to steal the car keys. He's going to try to convince me to give them to him. We're going to convince people to promote us or let us be in charge of something, to hold a position, to volunteer, whatever it is. And people don't want to give resources to people they don't respect. So when we haven't set the foundation of status in relationships that matter, if we try to negotiate for power in those relationships, what we see from lots of evidence is that we fail. And it becomes a lot harder for us to actually have the control that we also want. This is an explanation. Right now we're at 4 female justices, but it's an explanation why you'll see, right, gender imbalances at senior leadership in high power positions, because without equal levels of underlying status, it's harder for some people to get those positions than others. But let's just say you actually do end up in a situation where you do have a lot of power. Even then, even if you are the power holder, if you do not have status, this is an area that I have done a lot of research on over the years, things actually get worse. It's not that you have been able to essentially skirt around the problem, you've created an even bigger problem. And what we see is that people who hold power and are not respected are treated very badly. When we talk about incivility, incivility is our term for like mistreatment of a low level. So it's not necessarily hostility or aggression, but it's low-level things like being interrupted, like people implying you're not qualified for your job, like people not inviting you to the meeting or cutting you out of the information flow, things like that. Power without status turns out to be a very unpleasant place to be. It's often why if you go through airport security, and I'm already a little bit nervous tomorrow because there's this whole what is going on with Austin airport security, but I'm going to hold that aside for the moment. But when you go through airport security, people often get really snarky. Why? Because you have a situation where the person standing before you has a tremendous amount of power. You are not getting on that plane unless you make that person happy. However, from a status perspective, a lot of people are resentful. Why do you get to have so much control over me? Even if buried in your non-conscious brain, it often leads people to be hostile and nasty in those types of situations. And what we see in organizations and all kinds of data is that status is often a reason people will leave groups. It's not money and it's not title, it is not being respected. And we see that all the time. So if we look at data on women, for example, we see patterns that senior women in organizations will often leave organizations at greater rates than younger women, which at first seems paradoxical because you think, wait, those are the people who made it, and now they have all the power. Why would you leave? They're always telling a status story. Power without status leads them to be mistreated. They have other options, and they exit. So these are the reasons why I say that if you can become and embrace this idea of I know what status is, and I can actually take actions to influence my own, we set ourselves up for a lot more success, more influence, more power attainment, and it allows us to take the power that we do have and actually use it really effectively without this incivility and backlash. So let's talk about how do we influence our status? Because at first, one of the challenges says, well, wait a second, if my status is a judgment that other people make about me, I don't control that. And that starts to feel a bit overwhelming. We do not control what other people think about us. That is true. But we have a lot of influence over what other people think about us. So I said, the title of my book is called Likeable Badass. I think it's catchy, but I didn't just call my book that because it's catchy. It's just a catchier reference to the underlying science of how do status judgments get made. So here's what happens. All day long, you live your life. You encounter other people. People you work with, people you see at the grocery store, people you see on social media. And your brain is always updating, what do I think about that person? And while you're doing that, everybody who encounters you is updating their thoughts on what they think about you. And it turns out those judgments are not random. We're always trying to figure out the same two things about everybody we encounter, the same two things they want to know about us. So they're depicted here. The first one is, what are your intentions toward me? Are you friend or are you foe? Are you going to make my life better or are you going to make my life worse? This is the most important thing we try to figure out about every other human being, because if they're not a friend, nothing else matters. If you lived in cave person times and an unknown cave person walked into your cave, the first thing you try to figure out is, why are they there? Are they there because they have some extra food they want to drop off? Or are they there because they're trying to kill me and steal my food? And in a fraction of a second, human beings will draw a judgment about what are your intentions. Are you trying to be helpful? Or are you trying to be hurtful? Well, not surprisingly, we want to be around people who are going to be helpful, not just likable, warm, generous, sincere, honest. If you have those qualities, you make other people's lives better. And people like that. They want that. And so this dimension of warmth here, this horizontal line, is essentially that measure of, are you helpful to other people or are you selfish, disinterested, quarrelsome, things like that. So the warm end is the one that we value and respect. Now, once I know that your intentions are good, the next thing I want to figure out is, can I rely on you? So if you're in my cave and I know that you're not there to hurt me, great, but are you good at anything, like hunting? Because I am not taking you with me if you are just going to slow me down. So the other thing that we try to figure out in short order is, can I rely on you? you are capable. So that's going to be things like your assertiveness, your competence, decisive, persistent. These are qualities that if you have them, you're going to get stuff done. And I value that too. So these two dimensions are foundational in how we perceive other people and how other people perceive us. This circle has a name in psychology. The name is the interpersonal circumplex of person perception, and we will all agree that would be the world's worst title for a book. So, likable badass it is, but the science is there and it's very robust. So the idea is that when we send signals to our audience that we are in this upper right, that we really care and we're really capable, what that will do in our audience's brain is trigger, ding, 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 this is a person I respect. And that sets the foundation for all of these good things that happen to us in our life. So the idea of what we are trying to do, and we're all trying to do this already, and I'm going to give you some specifics and ideas to talk about it, to think about it, is to find authentic ways to convey to as big an audience as possible, as often as possible, hey, I really care and I know what I'm doing. And this is all a communication exercise, right? Because everyone in this room does really care about people other than themselves, and they're really good at stuff. But it only translates into respect when another person believes that. So the better we can signal it, the more we get that really valuable reward. So I'm going to talk about 3 ways we signal that to our audience. The first one is that we have to tell strong stories about ourselves. Strong stories are going to be, we have to put out into the world information that tells people, hey, I care and I know what I'm doing. So much about what people learn from us comes from us. And we are a channel of communication that we cannot waste. I learned this very early on in my career in a somewhat unfortunate way, but a way that served me well. So I have been an academic for over 20 years. That was not my first rodeo. It wasn't something I actually really even intended to do. I started my career as a management consultant for McKinsey & Company. I get there, and I'm on my very first project, and everyone is chattering, all the new people, about who are you working with, who are you working with. So when I tell people who's on my team, I don't even know who these people are yet. The one guy who's now most senior to me, I'm the baby, he's ahead of me, so he's essentially going to be my boss. Everyone tells me, oh, I've heard about that guy. I heard he's a total rising star. And McKinsey has a very up or out kind of culture. So people are hyper-focused on who has status and respect of the audience. Everyone says, this is the guy. All right, so I start to work with him. And I have never named specifically what the opposite of a likable badass is, but let's say it's an unlikable dumbass, okay? That is what this guy is, okay? And I cannot figure it out. He's terrible to work with. He's mean. He doesn't seem to know anything. Clients don't like him. And yet here, everyone is chattering about how amazing he is. It drove me insane, and it almost essentially drove me out of consulting before I had even ever really gotten in. I was super annoyed. I was also super perplexed, okay? Now, a lot of times, right, when people hear that kind of story, they're just like, oh my God, that's like, I never want to be that person, especially when you hear what I then later uncovered. So I finally confess to a colleague of mine that I'm having a terrible time working with this guy. And the guy says to me, I hear you. I actually went to business school with that guy. So I've known him a really long time. That's exactly who he was then. It's who he is now. I don't think he's very smart. I don't think he's very nice, but I also agree he has a great reputation around here. So very depressing. Time goes on. I'm still there. Months later, my friend comes into my office with like this just expression of eureka. What? He said, I figured it out. I said, what'd you figure out? He said, I figured out where all the good press about this guy comes from. Where? He said, it comes from him. I said, well, how do you know this? He said, well, when people would start to talk him up, I would say to them, where did you hear that? And sometimes people would actually remember where they heard it. And then I would go to that person, like, who told you that guy was doing so well? I said, eventually I was able to trace it back to enough people who remembered he told me he was doing so well on his projects. And they had never worked with him. They had no reason to doubt it. Okay, so this is where most people say, like, this is why I hate talking about myself, because I would never want to be that person, right? Which of course we don't want to be that person. But what I learned at a really young age, which I've now that I'm an academic have supported with my own research, is, wow, how you present yourself matters a great deal. And I thought, If talking yourself up could be that beneficial for someone who has no underlying talent, imagine how well it would work for someone who actually had talent. So I left really intrigued by self-promotion, not afraid of it. And I kind of always kept that story in the back of my mind. So if you're a person who says, like, I really do not feel comfortable talking about myself, I try to avoid it at all times, two things I want to say about it. First is both evidence-based. The first is what we see in all the science is that people are considered the experts about themselves. Who knows you better than you do? People take many things at face value, okay? Which is why populating disinformation is so easy. Right? They don't challenge things that often, especially when person is seen as an expert. You are seen as an expert on yourself. So what we see is when people talk themselves up, people generally have more favorable impressions. When they talk themselves down, people have less favorable impressions. The second thing is that people are not paying that much attention to you, okay? There's a phenomenon in psychology called the spotlight effect. We pay attention to us, so we think everybody is hanging on our every word and move. They're not. They have their own life to worry about, just like you do. Turns out, when it comes to storytelling, it's a really good thing. So I had this experience at McKinsey, and then many people know Adam Grant, a very well-known Wharton professor, author. Adam Grant and I were baby professors 20 plus years ago at UNC, and I was telling him this story, and we were like, we should actually like do the research on this to figure out like why does this work as well as it did. So we do, and what we basically find is that people are busy, and when people are busy and they hear things, they're really good at remembering what they heard, and they're really bad at remembering where they heard it. And that actually turns out to be really useful for self-promotion. You can be pretty self-promoting, and essentially the source, you, fades over time because people aren't paying that much attention to you, and people remember the content of what people said much more. And so what we found was when people were self-promoting and their audience was really busy, like most audiences, they got a real bump from that self-promotion. So I want to talk about how to do it in ways, to talk about and present ourselves in ways that actually feel really authentic, because authenticity and strategy can go hand in hand, and I'm never going to advocate for somebody to do something that doesn't feel true to who they are and who they want to be, okay? So how would we tell a stronger story in ways that are authentic? One way is we can be aware of and potentially drop and modify behaviors that are actually weakening our story. So lots of people have been told at various points you shouldn't do certain things, like rejecting a compliment. Well, here's why. Because some of these behaviors actually lead your audience to put you somewhere in this circle that you don't necessarily want to be. So when we self-deprecate and we cut ourselves down, people generally think we're very warm and often funny, because cutting yourself down is actually a comedic act, and many comedians that you like, their whole routine is just cutting down on themselves. But the challenge of it is it actually reduces your credibility, because we see from the science, you say you're not good at something, people believe you. Rejecting compliments ends up being the worst of the worst, because when someone says you've done something well and you say, no, I didn't, one, they take you at your word, so you're seen as less capable. But also, when you compliment someone, you're trying to do something nice for them. And that's what someone's trying to do when they compliment you. So when you disagree with them, you're essentially saying the gift you tried to give me is terrible and you have bad taste. So it ends up making people feel less close to us. So sometimes telling a stronger story involves stopping doing things that are not productive, and simply being quiet would be better. Other times, we can actually think of things we want to start doing or replace them with that would feel more natural but would be more productive. And I wanted to give you a few examples of what those things could be. All right, so most people recognize Stacey Abrams in this photo. I watched a television interview done by Stacey Abrams several years ago when she was asked what I thought was a tricky question. She was asked on CBS Sunday Morning, Stacey, do you aspire to be the president of the United States? And the reason I thought that was tricky was because most of us have been in a situation like that at some point, where you are given the option to talk about your future goals or your ambition. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you want to be promoted? Whatever it is. And you're not exactly sure how to respond to that, because you might have an answer, but you don't want to seem like you're not grateful where you are, you're overconfident about what you could achieve. And you might, if you're uncomfortable, just try to bat that question away, like, oh, I don't know, we'll see what happens, whatever. So I was curious how she was going to answer this question with obviously a lot of people looking on. I took a half second, and then she said this, and I thought this was a very smart way to answer this question. She said, Do I hold it as an ambition? Absolutely. Then she said, I have a responsibility to say yes to that question for every person, every young woman, every person of color who sees me and decides what they're capable of based on what I think I'm capable of. And I thought that is a smart answer. Why? Because in 2 sentences, and only 2 sentences, she was able to convey to her audience 2 pieces of information. I see myself as very capable, right? I have no doubts that I could do this. It's my ambition. And I care about people other than myself. Now, you might think, okay, good answer, but I'm not sure what to do with that, Allison, because I do not want to be the president and CBS has not called me lately. However, each of us is interviewed many, many times a day. So how many times people have said to you, what's up, what's new, how's it going, how's work? All right, those are invitations to tell your story. Now, no one is interested in a 30-minute resume drop in response to that question. But the common things we say often end the conversation with no information exchanged whatsoever, right? We say, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm busy, okay? No information exchange. How about with a response that's as brief as this one, you could convey a lot more information or make the person you're talking to curious enough that they actually want to involve you in a conversation. So as a specific example, I live in Chicago now. I host an event. I invite a lot of people that I'm professionally connected to, but including some I don't know that well. A guy walks in, he's one of these people, I've only met him one time, and I greet him at the door, and I say, somewhat thoughtlessly, just, oh, hey, thanks for coming, how was your day? Just comes out. I don't know if I cared about his day, it's just a glorified hello, but he looks back at me, and he smiles, and he doesn't say fine, good, or busy. He says, Allison, I had the best day today. It's very polite, didn't take very long, but you might be wondering why was his day so good? Well, guess what? I can tell you because I've got curious and I asked him, why was your day so good? And what he said was, I got a new client today. And he said, I met this guy on LinkedIn. We met for lunch today. And by the end of the lunch, he signed up to work with me. I learned that he was in wealth management. Great. So that was the piece, dropped a little fact. Hey, I'm really capable. But then he said a second thing. He said, I'm really excited and inspired, Allison, because this guy has wealth, but now that he has built it, what he wants to do with it is really change the world. I'm feeling really grateful because by advising him, I'm essentially helping him maximize the impact that he can have. And so that idea of I care about people other than myself. And just in those 2 sentences, he was able to convey that piece of information. But now keep in mind, he didn't come up to me and interrupt me at the event and tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, I got a new client today, which is often what people think about when we think about talking about ourselves. No, don't do that. No one wants that. It's perfectly fine to live your life and let opportunities come to you. But when someone does open a door for some curiosity about your life, it's good if we walk through at least some of them and make the person curious, say something about our lives that allows us to transfer a little bit of information about what's happening to us to them. If he didn't tell me that, I would have no way of ever knowing that information. Even for people we work with day in and day out, no one has full visibility into what it is you do all day. So if you don't put some of that out there, people will never understand how capable and how caring you are. So I get interviewed for a newspaper article, and the journalist interviewing me does her job and everything. But at the end, we kind of finish it, and she says, off the record, can I get your advice on something? Sure. She said, I just wrote a book. She was really interesting. She actually became she was a journalist who became a bodybuilder, like a professional bodybuilder in midlife, wrote this book about it. I was, this is cool. She was starting to do some speaking related to it. So she was new at speaking. She wanted my advice on developing her speaking business. And she tells me a story. She said, something really cool happened. I got a standing ovation at a recent talk. And she said, I thought that was a pretty good anecdote to illustrate that I'm doing a good job as a speaker. But Allison, I don't know what to do with that. I cannot put got standing ovation on my resume. It's not going to work. I can't even put it like on my social media. I don't know how to talk about it without saying I'm bragging. And I said, I really do think you should talk about it because it's a great anecdote that very quickly is able to say I'm doing a good job without you having to say I'm doing a good job, right? Show them, not tell them. But I said, you have to think about how you're going to do it. And one specific technique that enables us to talk about these things, which you might have found yourself using, even if you couldn't name it, is called dual promotion. I call it brag and thank. Basically, the idea is I promote me and I promote you. So I'm going to say something good about myself, and then I'm also going to give thanks or credit to other people who played a role. Now, keep in mind, this is not self-deprecation. I'm not saying, no, 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 I did nothing, it was all that. I'm announcing and taking credit for my piece, but I'm sharing some of that with other people. That is what dual promotion is. And the research shows that when we use this as a communication behavior, we are seen as more capable for the thing we did, and we are also seen as more caring because we are shining a spotlight on someone else. So I told her dual promotion would be a nice way for you to talk about this. Whether you're talking about it in a one-on-one conversation with a client, look for your artful moment to drop that into the conversation. And when you do, you can say, I was really grateful. I had this great experience recently with a client like yours, and they gave me a standing ovation. That's the brag. And then the thank piece comes in. Who do you want to thank for that? Maybe it was the event organizers who planned so well and gave you such great information that you felt so prepared. Or maybe it was your family for listening to you practice your talk. But the idea is when we share the credit, we actually get the benefit of both of these things that we're going for. So this is a great behavior in the I'm sending you an update email about what's going on a project. It is a great actually way to talk about things on social media. I get a lot of questions about how to show up on social for telling stories. This is a very long version, but I stole this as a friend of mine in Chicago who is a OB-GYN surgeon. But this is, for whatever part of this you read, basically the top part is, here are some publications of ours that we've just published. So that's the thing I did. The rest of it is nothing but thanks. Pleasure to work with these people. Shout out to the rest of our peer support team. Special thanks to the hundreds of volunteers, right? Brag once, thank. If you look and you lurk on social media, one of the things you can start to do is pay attention to how people are telling their stories on there. And a lot of the people that you'll find that are doing it really well, that you feel like that wasn't off-putting or icky, that was actually really nice and I learned something about them, know it or not using these types of techniques. So brag and thank is something that we can bring into our conversations to allow us to talk about ourselves while also showing that we care about other people. Who here put their out of office message on to let people know they were going to be at South by? I did not. Not out of intent, just out of busyness. But I met a woman. I'm going to tell you in a little bit how I met her. When I met her, and I started interacting with her on email, and I was struck because every single time I emailed her, I would get an out of office message back, every single time. And that was accurate because she doesn't really have an office. She's a speaker like me. She's traveling around doing all these things. But I was fascinated by this because I was born in the 70s. I was raised by a mother who said, Alison, you never tell anyone you're going to be out of town. They will rob your house. So I internalized this my entire life. And when email became a way of doing business when I was an adult, I thought you never put your out of office on. That's just telling strangers all over the world that you're out of town. Everyone's going to rob your house. And it's no one's business where you are. So I never used my out of office. Didn't even occur to me. It would still never have occurred to me in a million years if I didn't make this new friend and I started getting her out of offices. And the second I started getting them, this huge light bulb went off. And I thought, wait a second. Email, for many of us, is the bane of our existence. But she had brilliantly turned it into a very, very low effort, low risk storytelling device. Because her emails didn't just say, I'm out till this date, here's my assistant's number. Her emails told a little bit of a story that I was actually quite intrigued to read. So this is the format of her messages. This is the first one I ever got from her, but they all look like this if you were to email her. Okay, you probably can't read this from where you are, but I'll tell you the important parts. Okay, aloha and thanks for your email. I assume this has something to do with Hawaii because of that, but she says, I'm currently rocking a keynote on stage today. I'm delivering fun engagement, beautiful visuals, and an impressive virtual experience, right? I'm very capable. I'm good at what I do. I'm in demand. But the second piece is I care. I'm 100% focused on serving my clients, like I'll be focused on you soon. My replies will be delayed, okay? So I really care. If it's time sensitive or you want to text me a cute picture of your dog, a little example of non-self-deprecating humor, this is my cell phone number. All right, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, wow, right? I learned so much about what she was doing. It never feels self-promoting because it's simply, here's why I won't get back to you immediately. It's a great storytelling device. And when you think about how many people end up in your inbox every single day, anything we can do that allows us to take one story and broadcast it to the greatest number of people is going to be a really efficient way that we can build status rather having to do it one-on-one all the time. Now that I have written Likeable Badass. I get the privilege of women who do not know me, but have read the book, writing me these nice stories about times they've used things in the book and it's worked out well for them. And I got one from a woman who said, I turned my out of office on and you're not going to believe what happened. She said, I went to my kid's soccer game and I didn't really think about the fact that when you turn it on, everyone gets it, including people on the soccer team who were saying, who's bringing the snacks? So I show up at the soccer game and a dad that I've never spoken to walks over to me and says, you're a really big deal. And she said, what are you talking about? He said, well, I saw your out of office message and I was so intrigued. I spent 20 minutes online reading everything about you. I had no idea you had done all of these things. And she was like, it works, right? I would never have spent 20 minutes bragging to some dad on the sidelines. He did it all himself. He got curious and all it was my out of office that made me do it. So I say that you don't have to do everything, but we do want to take control and do something. I don't generally still turn my out of office on. I go in and out so much and I haven't gotten into this habit like my friend. And that's okay. I'm okay with it. But we have to make sure that we are using some tools. And if you're already turning it on, thinking about how you can tweak it so that your message is hitting on these two dimensions could be a really great way to strengthen your storytelling while you're off doing something else fun, like being here. All right, second way I'm going to talk about that we build our status is what I call small deposits. So a small deposit is like putting coins in a piggy bank. It doesn't cost you a lot. It's easy for you, but it could actually have value that compounds a lot over time. The best small deposits are ways in which you can use your unique skills and talents to make other people's lives better. There's a variety of ways you can do this. One place to start is to start and think about what are things that I love, that I'm good at doing, even if those things are not part of any official job or role that I have, they are things that I can do. And I have seen lots of examples of people build their status in big audiences simply by starting with the things that they're good at and figuring out how to easily make those things be beneficial to other people. So a couple of examples. I go to a big event and there's, as I'm sure there's people out here in the hallway too, they're filming all this stuff because they're doing all the B-roll and everything for social media channels. And there's a woman filming, but when the event starts, she actually sits down in the audience. And when it comes time for Q&A, she asks me a question. And her question is, she said, I really enjoy social media, Instagram in particular, but I work in a workplace where I'm relatively young. And many of my senior colleagues, a lot of whom are men, I've gotten the feedback implicitly, explicitly, that they think that social media is kind of kid stuff, it's a distraction, and therefore I don't know what to do because I don't want to abandon things that are authentic to me, but I do have to be cognizant that I'm showing up in a way that earns me the respect of people around me that I care about. And I said, well, I don't think you should abandon things that are important to you, but let me ask you a question. Have you ever used your skills on social media to help them? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, I'll take myself as an example. I'm on social media, but I didn't grow up with it. So I am sure I could be a lot better at it than I am. And if someone volunteered to help me and say, hey, I'd take a video of you talking and I could do some cool clips out of it, sweet, I'm not doing that. Or, hey, I go to my comms team and I say, I'm going to this event. If anyone's not going to be there, I'm happy to record some content and create some posts for the company channel. All of a sudden, when you do that, your skill is not just benefiting you, you're hitting that other element, which is I also really care. So looking for these ideas. I have seen so many successful people tell me that the thing that distinguishes them has nothing to do with their career. It has to do with some small little thing that they were doing anyway, that they found a way to get known for. So I talked to a guy, who here is a big nonfiction reader? Anyone? So this guy read a lot of nonfiction and he said, I just naturally, when I read nonfiction, take notes on it because I want to remember the key things. So I was doing that for myself anyway. And then he said, it occurred to me over time that a lot of people like me, they want to read more than they do, but they're just not making the time for it. And he said, I already had this big repository of notes and things I read. And so one person started to ask me a book recommendation, another. And he said, if I just took these things I already wrote and put the title of the book and the author on top, I had actually created a resource that a lot of people would value. So he said, I started doing that and then started just saying, hey, would you like me to add you to my email list? I'll email you the next time I have a book. And he said it was this amazing way to stay top of mind for people in my organization, people, my neighbors, people, clients that I never had anything to say to unless I was trying to sell them something, to stay in front of them. And where those ideas of those small deposits start is they start with us examining, hey, what do I do that's easier for me than it is for you? I wouldn't be the person to offer the services on Instagram. It'd be way too hard. But we have to start with the things that are easy for us, big impact to the audience. Now, if you're thinking in your brain, you're like, I don't know what mine is, I don't know what mine is, I'm gonna give you a no-fail one right here that everyone can do. You can do it while you're here today, and you can do it in every interaction you have going forward. And that is to start making more introductions. So who here sees themselves as a natural connector? Like, I love taking people in my network and bringing them together. Okay, great. I like doing this too. The introvert in me really likes it because when I can introduce other people and get them talking in a conversation that I'm not in, then I can be at home in my pajamas. But I came across this because it's something I naturally do. I meet a lot of people in my world, but an introduction is a great way to be able to distinguish yourself in minutes, right? You write the email, person A, meet person B. You're both amazing. I'll get out of the way and let you take it from here. It's very little work at all. But it allows you to add value to someone's life, which is very caring, in a way that allows you to show that you have something unique. In this case, you have a relationship that they don't have. You can do this in minutes, even when you're having these small conversations that you might be having with people here when you're waiting in line behind them, waiting to get into a room, waiting to get coffee. So you're staring at this woman and you're wondering, what does she have to do with anything? This woman's name is Myra Shaw. I was the beneficiary of being introduced to her. Someone made an introduction on my behalf. And when I say everyone can do this, this is one of the examples that will be my anecdotal evidence. The person who introduced me to Myra was my then 15, now 16-year-old son. He went to an academic summer program where Myra was one of the speakers. After the first day, I get a text from him. Hey, Mom, I think there's a speaker here who does what you do. Can I introduce you? And I said, sure, honey, that would be lovely. Of course, he's 15. So the next text, how do I do that? I didn't see his message. So before I even had a chance to answer, he sends me a photo. It's my name, cell phone, email. He said, is this okay? It looks great. The next day, apparently he has a session and then he waits in line at the podium to talk with her. And because he's a 15-year-old boy, he's kind of awkward about it. He's like, here, talk to my mom or something. And she told me when I met her, she said, at first I thought I was in trouble and that I had to answer to you for something I said. And then she realized, no, that wasn't what he was saying. And then he didn't really explain what you did. I had no idea, but she said, it just occurred to me that in all my years of doing this work, no teenage boy had ever invited me to meet his mom. So she said, I was just gonna roll with it. So she reaches out to me and says, hey, would you like to meet? So I agree to show up 30 minutes early when I pick him up. And we have a coffee, and within 5 minutes, we have hit it off. Like, we are text friends. I've been on her podcast. I visited her when I was in Houston for work. Like, we have now had this relationship that has lasted for a long time. And again, introduction, right? The person who made that introduction at that point did not drive. He still does not put his clothes in the hamper. He can only cook ramen, but even he has the ability to like lift his eyes up and be like, I know you, and I know you, and I could put you together. And that alone, that simple act can be a huge differentiator. So the postscript of this story is, like me, she's an educator. And like me, she does what I do, which is every time you finish a course or a program, you tell yourself that you're going to sit down and make notes of everything that worked well, everything you want to change, so you have really good recollection the next time you teach it. But in reality, what we all do is we slam our binder shut with exhaustion, we shove it on the shelf, and we do not look at it until it's time to prep for the next year. So fast forward to this past summer, one summer after he was in the program, I get a text from her. She has clearly opened her binder that has been stuffed with all of the papers not cleaned out from the year before. And what is on top of the binder? The note he wrote her the year before, right? She saved it because it was an heirloom. It just got shoved in the binder. But I thought it's really interesting because of all the students she's ever taught, just like me, you don't remember them all. And I thought, she'll remember him. She'll always remember him. And what he did was basically scribble something on a piece of paper and take a few seconds. So that idea of being small is it doesn't take a lot of our time to actually make that kind of impact. All right, last one, and that is what I talk about is building an army of other promoters. So if telling our own story is what we'll say is self-promotion, so that comes from me, other promotion is going to be what other people say about us. This means people talking about us behind our back. Now, of my 3 kids, my youngest is a girl. She has just started middle school. Middle school, particularly for women, is where you learn to develop a lifelong fear of people talking about you behind your back. Every single day, there is some alleged hurt that is discussed at the table when she gets home from school. I have no idea how many of these things actually happen because so-and-so heard from so-and-so who heard from so-and-so that perhaps something negative was said at recess. But here's the deal. We are still fearful of that, but most of the things, many of the things that people say about us behind our back are actually really positive. So every time someone has said to you, oh my, you don't know so-and-so, you totally have to meet them. They're amazing. What's happened in that little short interaction is one person is building the status of another person who's not even there. And these people who value us, who respect us, can be such assets for building our status far and wide if we do a couple of simple things. So we want to, when you hear that happens, right, on a day, it lifts you. Like, oh my God, someone was saying something nice about me. I feel so good. We want to try to be more intentional about making it happen more often. There's a couple of things that we can do. One of them is putting ourselves in situations to meet more people. Rule number 1 is someone cannot talk you up if they do not know you exist. So the first step in getting somebody to actually be able to build your status for you is meeting them and letting them know who you are, right? Having something to say when they ask you what you do, having something that sparks conversation and curiosity. And I want to emphasize the point that the people who can be your best other promoters, the best microphones of the great work that you do, could literally be anywhere. So we're staring at this picture. This is Rachel. Rachel is the author of the Out of Office email, okay? This is how I learned that great technique. But I wanted to highlight Rachel. She has been an amazing other promoter for me. Some of the biggest stages that I have ever stood on with the biggest audiences as a speaker were introductions that Rachel made. Okay, she has opened a tremendous amount of doors. Why is Rachel of all my other promoters particularly interesting? I think because of where I met her. In an airport bar. I took the very last seats at the Raleigh-Durham Admirals Club. It is a very small little airport lounge in North Carolina. I am not really a sit at the bar kind of person. I am definitely not a talk to strangers in airports kind of person, but that was my only option. So I sat there. I did not intend to have a conversation, but Rachel is as chatty and as extroverted as this picture makes her seem. So she is talking away to the bartender, and she finally says something that sparks a recognition of similarity in my brain that causes me to talk to her. She says that she is also a speaker and she's returning from an event. That made me just curious enough to turn and say, what do you speak on? What do you do? So we strike up a short airport conversation. We exchange cards. We follow up afterward. And that was 6 or 7 years ago. We are still great friends, in great touch, and we have mutually looked at many opportunities to open doors for each other. So it's really important when we think about going out into the world to recognize that our other promoters can be anywhere and to have more conversations with people. Now, what I will tell you, my introverted self, right? Since I've met Rachel, I have gotten a lot more open to talking to people in airports. Guess what? I've never met another Rachel. Most of them are kind of crazy. But you know what? I haven't wasted that much time either. So looking for really efficient ways of, hey, I'll chat with you. Maybe something will come of it. Maybe you will just pass through my life or the coffee line, whatever it is, but you just never know. And so opening ourselves up to these meetings can create a tremendous amount of benefit. We do, though, have to make sure we do the second step. And the second step is no one becomes another promoter for you if they do not respect you first. So knowing them is not enough, right? We do have to do the quick, efficient things to invest in them to say, you see me as a person who's caring and capable. Again, even in a 5-minute get to know me conversation, I could make an introduction. I could make a recommendation, something that would allow you to see my value. But once we've done that second part, then there's a third thing that can be really helpful. And that is that we need to motivate people to pick up the microphone. Meaning a person can think you're great. They can really respect you. They only become an other promoter when they start verbalizing that or writing that to other people. And that oftentimes people who value us do not do that for us for the simple reason that they aren't thinking about it. They are getting up worried about their own life, just like you are. What's my schedule going to be today? Like, what's going on at work? What am I doing at home? All those things. You don't wake up in the morning, I suspect, and budget time to think about who should I be shouting out today and where should I be shouting them out. No, they're not doing that for you either, but it's not that they wouldn't. So I want to close with 2 ideas for thinking about how do we get those people who value us to go out in the world and shout that far and wide. All right, I'll start with the scarier one and then I'll end with the more feel-good one. The scarier one is one of the most surefire ways to get people to talk you up is to ask them to do it. Works brilliantly, okay? I have been a negotiation instructor for over 20 years. Negotiation, it is not just for cars, houses, and salaries. Negotiation is a toolkit for getting things you want. Sometimes what you want is for someone to go into a room you're not in and say great things. Guess what? They'll be a lot more likely to do it if you ask them. It hasn't occurred to them. And everybody is just like us, okay? One of the biggest mistakes we make in life is thinking we're really special. If it works for you, it's probably going to work on other people. You like to be helpful. You also are busy. You want to be maximally helpful in minimum time. So if someone says to you, here's exactly how you can help me, and it's a really easy thing, you're grateful, you're relieved. Oh, you gave me something easy to do that I could do to be useful. Excellent. That's exactly how people feel when you ask them. Again, I get these notes from strangers. I got one from a woman who said, I tried this out. She said, it scared me to death, but I asked my boss. My boss was going to an annual meeting for our company, but I'm not senior enough to get invited. He was invited, but at the meeting were also a lot of other senior people that need to know me and respect me for me to be able to do my work to the best of my ability. So I gave my boss a list of people that I wanted him to see, and when he saw them, to tell them how great I was. And he said I was very nervous until I started getting these text messages from my boss at the event. And she sent me the screenshots. And the screenshots were adorable. It was basically the boss coming for his flowers. Like, I ran into Bob at coffee this morning and told him how good you are. Like, I'll have to see if I can find Molly at the cocktail hour. He was checking them off like a scavenger hunt, okay? He was super happy to do it. She could see from his response, he was genuinely happy to do it. But we both agreed there was no chance he was going to go in and go seek out all those people all over the building if she hadn't asked him to do it first. And so if we can muster up that courage, we will get a lot more people expanding our status, and is going to set the stage, greater influence, greater power, greater impact, greater life satisfaction. All right, the second one, the feel-good one, is one of the most authentic, wonderful things that you can do in the world is also one of the most strategic for building your own status. And that is the surefire way to get other people to talk you up in addition to asking them is for you to talk them up first. Okay? Reciprocity is an extremely strong norm of social interaction. If you walk into one of these hotels and you hold a door open for a person, that stranger is going to stop and hold the next door open for you. If you go to lunch with somebody and they insist on paying, your brain is like, I need to remember this because I need to pay next time. I need to keep this relationship in balance. This is what human beings instinctively do. So one good way to get somebody to do something for us is for us to just do it first. If we become evangelical talker-uppers of the good work that we see people doing around us, 2 things happen. One, it's a super fun way to be an ally, a sponsor, a mentor. It's a fun way to live. But it also comes back to us because people hear it, the grapevine's efficient, and then they look for their way to be able to do it in turn. And so one of the rules I have for myself is I don't, despite, I teach this stuff for a living, but I have a life like you do, right? I have a job, I have kids, I have a whole bunch of things I'm worried about. I don't get up every day and make myself a list. But what I do is I have a little mental way to catch myself. When I find myself naturally thinking something positive about somebody, it just pops into my head or I interact with them and I'm like, oh, that person is pretty impressive. I try not to let it die there. I try to put it out into the world, and that's my cue of, oh, that's a person you could promote. I use my social media for promoting people. I like to be a connector and say, hey, who else can I introduce you to? I might even tell them, whatever it is, to find a way to take those moments and be an evangelical talker-upper of the work that people are doing around you. All right, I might have saved us 1 or 2 minutes for questions. I'm going to end with a couple of things. Okay, you're here, the mass of humanity. Who's here for the first time? I'm here for the first time. Okay. So if you're thinking like, how do I make the most out of this, right? There's things you learn in sessions, but there's also how you engage with people afterward. So I am a huge proponent of making big impact in how we build our status by doing simple things consistently. So here's an example in a place like South by that you could get done almost in a single day. All right. Simple things. I call it 10, 10, 10. Meet 10 new people. Like, hello, my name is, chat with them. That's it. Okay, meet 10 new people, check. They do not have to become your lifetime besties. Make 10 small deposits. Do something. Make an intro. Give people directions. Tell them where you found the best taco, whatever it is. Do something that makes their life better. Get in the habit of looking for ways to make people's life better. And then the third one is talking people up. Talk up 10 people to others. Or if you want to go for extra credit, you could say, I'm going to have 10 people talk you up. And these types of things done day in and day out, they end up making a really big impact. All right, final thing. If you want to stay in touch with me or you have a question you don't get to talk about today or any of that stuff, this QR code, nothing bad is going to happen to you. It just goes to my website and it gives you an easy way to do one of up to 3 things if any of them are interesting. I have a free newsletter that I put out on Substack that's called The Upper Hand, where I share behavioral science to help people excel. I am on LinkedIn as one of my platforms, and I'm on Instagram as the other. So from my website, you can click on all of those things. If you don't do those things and you want to find me later, I'm pretty easy to find. That is my website. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming. It's awesome to talk with you.